And welcome back to the Drone Workshop. Today we're working on a power distribution board I soldered up. It's kind of ugly. I'd never soldered onto pads on a circuit board before, so they're pretty globbed on, and I'm going to reuse this board, so I want to desolder it. And there's a few different ways that you can go about that, and I'm going to go over a couple of them. One I have good luck with, and one I've never been able to get to work real well. First is the solder sucker or desoldering pump or desoldering syringe. It's a spring-loaded metal syringe, and you get the metal hot and you get the tip of it real close, then you push the button and it sucks it up into the syringe. It works really well. Every now and then they will jam with the solder that's sucked up in them, and you have to take them apart. Next is the solder wick. It's like a fine copper braided wire. I've personally never had much luck with this stuff, and I don't really use it. I've had a lot better luck with the solder sucker. And here's the power distribution board mounted in my helping hand, and I've got a pretty hot soldering iron, and I go from pad to pad. I get it nice and hot and liquid, and then I push the button and it draws it up into the syringe. The nicer solder suckers, they have a like a ceramic tip. This one is it's a super cheap one I got off of Amazon, and it's a plastic tip one, but it works really well. It's also a good idea to wear safety glasses when you do this. And here I try to use the braid, or the solder wick. It's probably a lot more solder than the solder wick is meant to soak up. But when I was in airframe and power plant school, I tried using the solder wick there on much more small and delicate circuit boards, and even then I didn't have a lot of luck. I preferred the solder sucker. And here I'm just trying a couple things to try to get this stuff to work, but it's such a big heat sink, it just draws up so much heat up into it. I don't know how much of it actually gets down to the solder, and like I said, it might be because the solder blobs are so big. So I tried getting the metal liquid and then kind of sticking it on there real quick and trying to wake it up that way, and didn't have much luck. But this is also really cheap solder wick, also off of Amazon. So maybe better solder wick wakes up the solder better. Not sure. And I'll switch back to the solder sucker, or desoldering pump, whatever you want to call it. On a previous build, I tried using lead-free solder, lead-free electrical solder. It has some silver in it. It's a lot higher melting temperature, so it can be rough on the components on a circuit board. So I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend the lead rosin core electrical solder, and just solder with a fan on or a well ventilated area. It really doesn't smoke that much either, and I don't think the lead actually gets hot enough to vaporize. And here's kind of a close-up. Not too bad looking. And I've flipped the circuit board around. I'm going to proceed to desolder the pads on this side of the board. And you might notice the circuit board's a little crispy. I probably got a little bit too hot when I was soldering it, but it's not a huge deal if I toasted it. I caught it on sale on Hobby King for like $2.99, so it's a pretty cheap power distribution board, but it worked really well for the build that I used it for. I'd definitely buy it again. I'll have a link to it down in the video description. But it's got different pads to power your video camera, your video transmitter. You can send current to your, battery to your flight controller, so you can monitor it there. And it's got a couple other spots to power, maybe like lights or whatever else you want to power. And here it is all done. I've got it in needle noses because it's crazy hot, but it looks a lot better than it did. Thank you all for tuning in. Tune in next time.